Hey folks, thanks for joining me for this episode from the EmbellishPod. If you got here by chance, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button. Hopefully, I can be found on any podcasting platform that exists. And if you can't find me on a platform, send me an email at embellishpod@gmail.com, and I'll try to get that taken care of. You can also find video versions of this podcast on YouTube. You can find all of my links on Instagram at EmbellishPod or TikTok with the same handle. I have a website. It is www.embellishpod.com. It's a place to pick up these links, episode details, and more. Today, I have Sailor joining me from Good Deeds and a handful of other things that she's got going on. It's a really phenomenal conversation. I hope you take something from it. This morning, this afternoon, this evening, whenever you happen to be consuming this, I have Sailor joining me from Good Deed Spirits. Sailor, and go ahead and pronounce your full name so that way I can get that right, because I will mess it up inevitably. And kind of give us a little bit about who you are.
Well, thank you for having me on this show, John. I appreciate it. My name is Sailor Guevara, and I am the executive director of Good Deed Spirits, and we are a not-for-profit spirits brand.
Not-for-profit is confusing to a lot of people, right? Especially in the whiskey space, because everything is for profit.
Yeah.
But I've been following Good Deed specifically since its inception. I've got actually a bottle of batch 1 here,
Awesome.
because I love the things that Good Deed specifically stands for. Just kind of some of the things that they're leaning towards. And, I think, a couple of other brands have leaned into that a little bit with the community batch from makers. There's some good things that happen out there, but this is a brand that's explicitly built on that concept. But you specifically have been in the spirits industry for a long time. How did you get into spirits to begin with, I guess?
Yes, I have been in the industry, well, the hospitality industry as a whole, the alcohol beverage industry for my entire career. I started in restaurants and, when I was a kid back in the day, way, way long time ago. And I ended up behind the bar. I'm a curious person, and I just loved the exchange of talking to people about flavors. I loved learning about the bottles. Craft was not a thing at the time. I went into the wine space for a long time because that was an easier space to get into. Spirits it wasn't really like it is now. And spent a lot of time in wine, which was wonderful and interesting. But really, my love was whiskey. So I ended up coming out from behind the bar and representing brands for many, many years, which I loved doing. Traveled the country, traveled the world. Um, and I really just felt a calling. I felt some type of kinship with craft brands. And so brands that are emerging, the underdogs, the scrappy fighters, the people that have put their hearts and souls and a lot of times everything on the line, and not just to make money, and there's nothing wrong with making money, but to have a legacy for their children or their family, or perhaps they had land. Farming has changed so much in this country since even the 1930s and 40s. There's so many people that find themselves with land and go, well, this is my family's land and I have a connection to it, but what do I do with it? Some people sometimes haven't been farmers for generations. And so I just thought it was a beautiful thing, and the stories resonated with me. And it was a place where I could help because by the time I got into craft, I had some knowledge and experience enough to get myself in trouble. Um, and it's really where my heart belongs. So today I am a consultant for craft spirit brands. I help them with whatever I can. And then the Good Deeds project landed in my lap, and it was an instant yes for me.
You've touched on, sort of, you loosely touched on your career path that kind of, got you to where you are, and sort of the, knowing enough to get yourself in trouble. But from what it appears, given your career trajectory, has been good trouble, right? It's led you kind of to where
Yes.
you are. I guess, is there anything out of your background that sort of helped you, maybe it's, how you grew up, the family you grew up in, whatever, that sort of helped you with this storytelling aspect, right? Because most of these craft brands have really interesting and unique stories, and I like what you're saying about agriculture, because there's this whole generation of people within the agriculture space that they leased out their land because they didn't want to farm anymore. It wasn't profitable,
Yeah,
and it seems like in some places it's starting to trend that way again. So
yeah,
trying to squeeze the most dollars out of the acres that you have, as opposed to letting someone else rent it from you, you can get into these non-commodity farming, whether it be, specialty crops for growing vegetables or growing for distilled spirits specifically. But kind of circling back around, long way to ask a question of like, you've got these interesting stories that exist out there, but not everybody's good at telling them what has been a part of your life that's put you in a position where you can tell the stories well.
gosh, that's such a great question. I don't know if I've ever been asked that question like that. Well, I come from an immigrant family, Greek immigrants, very recent Greek immigrants. We spoke both Greek and English in my home, and I grew up with people who had were forced to leave their country and come here and came for a better life. So there was a lot of storytelling embedded in my upbringing, to not only pass on stories, but and I've lived in other countries for a very long time, and boy, do I have a different perspective now on what it's like a little bit, I should say, of what it's like to live in another country. And you do feel this desire to keep some sort of connection to your culture.
Hmm.
So culture has been a big part of my life. Greeks tell their stories through food. So flavors have always been really important. And then even though I'm a city girl, my mother kind of dragged us around the country when we were kids, and I did live on some farms. There were horse farms in between agricultural farms. For so I kind of had a little bit of an introduction to it. But I think the storytelling part comes from a passion to learn and understand, and then an excitement to share what you know and what you've learned. And I have to truly be into what I'm talking about. So I'll tell you, if I'm excited about something, it's very genuine. Whether I'm getting paid or not doesn't matter. I'd like to make a living like everybody else and have a roof over my head. But I have to genuinely be passionate and interested in what I'm talking about. And that doesn't mean that that won't change. We can all find things out about people and companies that are not so great and then have to correct ourselves later. That's okay. We're human beings. But just the excitement, I think, of meeting people that went, you know, I have to say, thank God most craft distillers didn't know what they were getting themselves into when they began, because they wouldn't have done it probably.
Hmm.
um, but these people that just have this idea and this fortitude and this will and desire, and it's one of the most difficult things to do you could possibly do in this country as a business. And then to see them be successful, to watch people light up when you tell the story, that's really powerful. And it may sound cheesy, but I've experienced it for myself. I've stood at the tasting bar in tiny little distilleries and said, like, yes, you've had whiskey, and yes, you've been here and there, but you don't know this story. And this story is just as important. And to see people begin to engage, it's my favorite thing.
And I mean, it truly is audacious for craft brands to have the gumption to begin, right? And I've asked this question of a bunch of craft distillers. If if you sort of knew what it was going to take now, like all of the hurdles you're going to hit before you ever began, would you have began, right? Because at the end of the day, to start a craft distillery, you're an entrepreneur, right? So most businesses
Yeah.
fail to begin with. You're an
Yep.
entrepreneur in hospitality, even more of those fail. But you're also an entrepreneur as a part of the ag industry, right? Because you have to consume these grain spirits, which also incredibly fail, and then manufacturing. And so you're touching on all these facets of
Alcohol manufacturing,
yeah,
one of the most regulated, unfairly, by the way,
right.
regulated industries in the country.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's more regulated than maybe drug manufacturing is regulated. It's
Indeed.
i- incredibly daunting,
Yes.
and that is what you get a lot of responses from folks that are like, if I had known, it probably would have scared me off of it, right? But
Yes.
there's this,
Yes.
you know, audacious ignorance that exists that kind of
Yes.
pushes people to where they are. But um, you've made an incredible career on storytelling for different brands, for different things. You have a podcast, you've written, you've represented brands, but in 2020, you were named an icon of whiskey by Whiskey Magazine. What did that mean to you, right? If you look at your career, what does that mean to you?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. So, first of all, let me just say that that happened within a few weeks before my state shut down. I was in
Mhm.
Washington State at the time. So, should we have been in that room at the award show? Definitely not. Um, I mean, I think about it now and I'm like, wow.
Mhm.
Um, I think at first I didn't really understand the power of it. I was like, okay, well, first of all, it's my peers that have granted me this award. It's very kind and I'm very appreciative. Did I feel like an icon? Absolutely not. Um, but I'll tell you, I think I felt the need to live up to that since then. And I think that's the most important thing. And look, awards can be really important and they can be meaningless.
Mhm.
Like in the end, I don't know if it's okay to curse on this
Go
podcast,
ahead. Yeah.
but I have a sailor mouth. In the end, who gives a shit, right? Who cares? Some people care a lot about those
Mhm.
awards, and that is very, very valid. And some don't at all. For a woman in this industry, anytime a woman or a person of color or someone from a historically marginalized community receives an accolade, I think it's critical to celebrate them. I don't care what it is, how insignificant it may seem. It is significant in an industry where I have not been welcome, where barely are my own, you know, does my own community advertise to me,
Mhm.
a woman. So that made me acutely aware of how important it is. I was named, they gave me this poster that's behind me.
Mhm.
It's I can't just be like, "Oh, screw it," it doesn't matter. It's really, really important to me that I live up to it. Um, it definitely speaks to imposter syndrome that, women and people who are, oppressed classes, things like that. It's common for us to have imposter syndrome because if we walk into a room most of our lives and don't see ourselves there in
Mhm.
leadership or power positions, of course you're going to think you're an imposter if you get even close to that level. So I speak a lot about imposter syndrome these days. Actually, I give a lot of talks on it. Um, it's I've won other awards since then. ADI was kind enough to name me one of the top spirit influencers last year. So now I have to work even harder. I have to make sure I live up to that. But 2020 was a heavy year. It
Mhm.
was a difficult year in so many ways. Um, I hope we're not heading back there right now, but if we are, I'm doing better this time. I learned a lot from how to survive the emotional turmoil, watching my industry suffer that really hasn't rebounded, just trying to help. That's all I did for 2 years was just try my best to help people. So that doesn't change and it shouldn't change just because we're not in a global pandemic at the moment. People are always in need of help, and I think that's was kind of the takeaway was live up to accolades and continue to help. And another beautiful thing that came from that award was I was asked to write for American Whiskey Magazine.
Mhm.
And again, it was something that I was like, "Well, how the hell do I do that? Like that I can't do that." And I did, and now I write for several different outlets, and I love it. It's just another way I get to share stories and some of the things that I've learned through my career. So, um, you take what you want from things like that, right? You can just take the poster, you can take the award and put it on a shelf, or you can do something with it. And I just decided to do something with it.
and you and I are similarly aged, and I would love to hit like a 5 to 7 year spell where we don't live in unprecedented times with new and unique things to experience. That would be
Ugh,
super,
that'd be
super dope.
so great. Yeah.
But you made a point back there about, does the industry that you work in currently market to you specifically? And I don't think that it does it well. I think if we were 5 years ago, we would say not at all. I think
Correct.
now maybe we say yes. My wife and I were at Kentucky Bourbon Festival a couple of years ago, and we stopped in a local liquor store, and we kind of came out, and she said, "Man, that's very Mojo Dojo Casa House in there, right?" Like, it was very much not a comfortable place for her. I didn't even notice it, right? Because
Mhm.
I live in a
Yeah.
privileged class. You know, my awareness is not necessarily as high, but you have dedicated a significant time to diversity initiatives within the spirits industry. Can you identify maybe some changes over the past decade that have gone in the right direction, and then maybe bookend that with what work still needs to be done?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. I feel the experience your wife had because as someone that reviews spirits almost every day, I would love to just talk about the packaging of every
Mhm,
spirit and whether it's great for behind the bar. Will it fit on the shelf? Is it easy to read in the dark? Is it easy for a bartender to pick up and pour? And then does it appeal to a woman? Can
mhm,
my hands open it? Maggie Kimbrell, who's another absolute icon, who writes for everything, she talks about this all the time. Like, if my hand can't reach around the bottle, you got a problem, man, you know? Um, but yes, things have changed. There is always positive change. And, you know, I think much like probably anything, technology, any advancement is like a pendulum. You're going to swing back and forth until you know, get where you're supposed to be going. We are reversing it as a society in the United States right now, which I hope is just a pendulum swing. But our industry, I think, is doing a lot better. The fact that I'm sitting here talking to you right now points to that. Um, the fact that I'm writing for so many outlets and my opinion it gets asked for award shows and the fact that I see people of color now in rooms in the whiskey space,
mhm,
I can tell you that when I left the last brand, I retired from being a brand ambassador in 2021. From when I started to when I ended, I can tell you I have put together rooms where I was the only white person in the room, and
mhm,
that was amazing. I have put together rooms in the whiskey space where it was all women or mostly women. When I started out, I would be the only woman in the room, and I would have to fight. I had to learn to not let men talk over me or
mhm.
correct me when they were wrong and I was correct. Took a long time. Finally realized I'm getting paid to be there whether I talk or not, so I'd invite them to come up and lead the tasting for me. I'd be like, "I'll kick back and drink whiskey. You're the dummy. I'm getting paid to do it. You wanna get up there and talk? Go for it." And guess what? They shut up. Um, the initiatives that have been created, the programs, dare I use the word DEI? Let's not even get into that. That's a whole
We
other
can talk about that as long as you want to. I'm on
Oh,
board.
I don't know. Then the cursing will really come out. Equity is important for everybody, right? Equity
Mhm,
makes everyone better. Equity takes nothing from anybody except for the oppressors. So we want equity. Um, Diversity can mean anything from you have blue eyes and there's not enough blue-eyed people getting XYZ, right? You're left-handed, I'm right-handed. It can mean anything. It can mean you're under the age of 30 or over the age of 50. So again, diverse voices and diverse perspectives are critical because otherwise all of the whiskey that you and I have on our shelves and all of the spirits that I have in my office, maybe 2% of them would exist and they would all taste the same. And who the hell wants that? If you don't like diversity, I dare you to eat the same fucking thing every day for the rest of your life without complaint. and you
Mhm.
have to wear the same clothes, and you have to wear you know, like, everything has to be uniform at all times. So, I recommend for people that disagree with me just to take a look in the good old dictionary there, not listen to news sources, just, you know, think about it. What does diverse mean? It can mean so many things. You know, you have got a diverse amount of t-shirts in your closet, I'm sure. You have a diverse selection of shoes, unless all your shoes are the same exact pair of shoes. Um, Focusing on what was missing, women being able, enough of us being present to be able to say, hey, I don't see myself in leadership positions and this needs to change. And really putting feet to the fire of our leadership helped change. Um, Again, without the craft industry, you would not have probably any of the diversity you
Mhm.
have in the spirits industry in the US right now, any of it. That comes from craft distilleries. The big guys, they don't need it, they don't care, they don't give a shit. They're the ones rolling back all of their DEI initiatives right now, which is sad for them and harming them.
Mhm.
Um, I'll tell you that there are some companies who announce that they rolled back their DEI initiatives, and I'll never touch their brands again, never, because it affects me and it affects people I care about, and it affects my industry as a whole. Right, more important than just me because I'm one person. It affects our entire industry. So I love. I just read a story for Drink Hacker on highlighting women, amazing women in the spirits industry globally. And it took me weeks to write it. I was pulling my hair out. I was like, there's too many. I'm going to leave somebody out. And I know so many of these women. And oh
Mhm.
my gosh, I can't leave them out. And they're also their contributions. I could not find a way to go, well, their contributions are less or more. And it was just insanity. And so I finally had to say to myself, oh my God, but this is amazing that
Mhm.
there's so many women that are face forward. This is so incredible. We have to pay attention to that. We have to pay attention to the need to see more diverse faces and have different perspectives. Um, and things like Step Up. Step Up is a program that was launched, that was conceptualized during the pandemic and launched by the American Craft Spirit Association. And the whole purpose of Step Up is to create an entrepreneurship program for the underrepresented professionals in spirits. So, okay, it's great to say, oh, I'll hire someone who's African American, or I'll hire someone who's Asian or Latin, you know, and you can sweep the floors. Well, great. What the hell did that do? Nothing. You know, thank you. We've always been cleaning and been behind the scenes. Appreciate it. So this initiative was asking the really difficult questions.
Mhm.
You know, how do we get these people into leadership positions? How do we offer a training and internship program that's real, not you'll shadow this person, you'll watch this. No, we're going to put your hands in there, and when you leave this program, you are going to be hireable in a leadership position. And they did it, and we're in year 4, I believe now.
Mhm. You've covered at least 3 questions that I don't even have to ask now, so it's wonderful. I love it when people do that, and,
Sorry,
kinda
I
walking
can be
backwards a little bit.
long-winded.
If you find a person who is okay with eating the exact same food all the time and wearing the exact same shirts and wearing the exact same shoes, um, you found a neurodivergent person, right? And they're not
Sure,
necessarily against equity or inclusion or any of those
correct.
things. They just
That's
have
correct.
certain things that they're trying to, eliminate, decision paralysis or whatever. Um, but I've been in events where women are leading tastings and women of prominence, and some fool that looks an awful lot like me will say, "Well, let me tell you something." I'm like, "No, you don't tell them anything. They're the expert in the room. We should all be quiet." But I think fear around DEI is exactly that, right? It's fear, and fear as a base instinct usually overwhelms reason and logic
Mhm,
and those types of
mhm.
capabilities. And it's really just
Yeah,
a lot of, white men afraid of losing their privilege, plain and simple, right? It's been a space that maybe has been exclusively reserved for them, one of the last bastions of prominence for them, and now they're starting to lose their grips on it, which is great because it brings a diversity of flavor profile that wasn't there before, right? Whenever
That's
you
right.
have 6 or 7, and I feel like I'm telling you, I'm not telling you, I'm telling anybody who's listening.
Of
Uh,
course.
when you have 6 or 7 companies, they're all going to develop to the same flavor profile based off of market trends. But whenever you diversify what the market actually looks like, then we get wonderful new flavors because not everybody's the same. And guess what? Even within the subsect of white male in their mid 40s, there's a big variance that exists, and we're appreciative of the new flavor profiles that come out of that. So that's my stump for it, right? It makes sense. It should exist. It really comes from either fear or lack of understanding of what it actually means. It's
Yeah.
examining representation at leadership level in a lot of companies and saying it doesn't meet the striation of the populace, right? So why doesn't
Mhm.
it? And how do we make sure that those segments of population have the opportunity to lead? Not just saying, "Oh, you are this, now you run."
Right.
It's what education do you need? What barriers exist within your
Yeah.
culture or within our culture to prevent you from this? And make sure you get equipped accordingly because at the end of the day, we all win. Going back to you're a Greek immigrant family, and I live here in the South, and we've been pseudo South. We've been far removed from our immigration, but we speak the same language. We tell people we love each other. We tell stories through food. Greek immigrants do that through food. A lot of
Yep.
immigrant cultures do that through food.
Yes.
So there's a
Yes.
commonality that exists there.
Yes.
Um,
It's the easy thing to recreate, right? If you're a musician, you can pick up guitar and play songs from your
mhm,
culture. But and I think that's what's so important about industries that make consumable things. Um, if you have someone that has, let's say, a Southeast Asian background, or an African background, and they're used to tasting foods that would spices that are maybe unique to their culture or different than the majority of spices used here, they're gonna understand and interpret flavors differently, and they might therefore create different flavor profiles if they're in a blending situation, if they're working with yeast and grains and, barrel finishes and so on. That's fun. Why wouldn't we want that? That's exciting. I mean, I think that's the cool part of spirits, all spirits. I just think that's so fun to have different and unique
mhm.
perspectives. Like, yeah, it's great to have your favorite, you know, home bar whiskey to go to every day, but again, like, you wanna keep drinking the same thing over and that's so boring. It's just boring.
Without a doubt, and that's I think the tie into the food or the tie into spirits here is pretty easy, at least from my perspective, because you could look at you could look at any Hispanic culture, Asian culture, and even African cultures, and you find similar ingredients that are put together in very very different ways and create very very different flavor profiles that become exciting. The exact same thing can happen within the craft industry, and they're the ones that usually push the bounds because the opportunity to experiment is far less costly to a craft brand than it is for the
Absolutely.
majors who are like, now we have to shut down a production bottling line to do this brand new
Right.
experiment. And I think what we've seen is that those big distillers have also realized the power of experimentation, and so now they all have their own little craft brands that they're producing some of these other ideas on, so they're picking up after the fact. I mean, they're doing craft as well as a homogenized conglomerate can do. Kudos to them for sort of figuring that out. And regardless, we've talked about a lot of things. We haven't really gotten too deep into good deeds yet, right? And that's what we're here to talk about. So let's talk about good deeds specifically. Just kind of give us the concept of how it came about, and then up to when you become executive director.
Yeah, so, there's a group called The Good Guys, and there's a group of distillers that was formed long before I got involved, and it was really, it was 100 distillers, and, they had a Facebook page, and it's about sharing information, sharing, tips, tricks, advice, a place where you can ask advice without feeling like a dummy, right?
Mhm.
Or without being embarrassed or whatever. Um, most are craft distillery owners, not all. Most are all distillers. And so they wanted to do more. Some of them were involved in creating Step Up, the internship program, and sat on the board, and they want to do more. And so in 2020, they launched Good Deed Spirits with the idea to release a whiskey or a spirit as often as they could and donate 100% of everything that comes in to Step Up and then other initiatives that touch the industry. So they put together batch one, which is a blend of malt whiskey, some single malt and malt whiskey from literally coast to coast and beyond, because we had a whiskey from Nantucket. And they did the blending at Headframe Spirits in Butte, Montana. And they raised almost $30,000 for Step Up with the first batch. Now, the first batch, they were able to do everything was donated, by the way. So, bottles, labels, the label design, the facility, the whiskey, the everything. And we were fortunate enough to get other folks on board to help out with, the cost of shipping and e-commerce and things like that. And so I was one of the first mentors for the Step Up internship program. And we were at the graduation ceremony, which was kind of mind blowing because we didn't know what was going to happen. We were like, the board, God bless them, was figuring it out kind of as it was happening. Because when you take two human beings and you're like, okay, we're going to send you to these different distilleries and they get paid, by the way. And you have to have transportation, you have to live somewhere, we have to make sure you have food, we have to make sure there's a curriculum. So we don't just throw you into the distilleries and they have you sweeping the floors, like I said, that so really smart distillers wrote curriculums, like what would you have wanted to learn? What's the critical information we can fit into this time? And it's almost a year-long program. And so my intern, Erin Lee, she is one of the most incredible individuals. Her and I went through this together for nearly a year, and it was crazy, and it was exciting, and it was cool. And she was hired as a distiller before she even graduated. And so we were sitting at the graduation, and I was just so emotional because it was so hard for all of us, including Erin and Yaki, the first graduates, to do this, to get through it. And we were like, we really did this. Like, they both had jobs before they graduated. And Erin is an Asian woman and Yaki is African American man. So, and they weren't, again, sweeping the floors or, hosing the ferment tanks. So I was asked by the two main guys, John and Johnny, to continue this. It's a lot of work. You're basically kind of running a spirit brand. Plus, you have to collect everything from people that are willing to donate. You have to ask for donations, which is super uncomfortable. And I said yes before I knew what I was getting myself into. And then I was like, oh shit, I have to really do this. So we planned for batch two. We put the word out to our good guys group who can donate all the things. Black Button stepped up because they're amazing human beings and offered their facility and their bourbon. And then Whistle Pig stepped up and said, we'll give you some rye. And I just thought, so cool, because they're both so close to each other in the Northeast. It's going to be like a real taste of the Northeast. And so we put a blending team together, and which consisted of myself, Liz from Whistle Pig, and Erin Lee, who had already graduated, and then a current at the time intern who's since graduated, Erica. And we all traveled to Rochester and we did a table blend. And I, again, just kept looking around the room and I was just like, I'm getting to experience this in my career. 20 years ago, I would have been like, shut up, that's never going to happen. I'm never going to see that. So I think we blended a deliciously amazing whiskey. It's a bourbon and rye blend, like I said. It's 45 ABV. Um, it's I think we have 100 bottles left at this point. Um, it's such a delicious whiskey, and I always say, if you don't like it or you don't like whiskey, buy it anyway and give it as a gift or
Mhm.
hold on to it, because I will somehow, some way keep doing this. And I do this because people like Phoenix Packaging and Niagara labels, they donate for free labels to us, printing boxes. Um, the folks at As Above, So Below Distillery in New Mexico gave me all my case boxes. I mean, glass, all of it. You really have to look at a bottle of whiskey and break down every component of it and go, how do I get every single thing donated? And then Big Thirst does our e-commerce, and man, it's a lot, but it's incredible, and it's incredible to see the people step up and also find that it's so important to them. So, and by the way, Erin Lee is now head distiller at Few Spirits in Chicago.
Mhm.
Go, Erin. So again, look at how incredible an initiative like this is. And everyone donates their time, because they care, because they want to see a change and they want to be a part of it. And it takes putting in the work.
It's an incredibly collaborative process, and Good Deeds has found a unique way to take something that's already complicated, and being a distilled spirits producer and adding in the nonprofit angle, which makes it the nonprofits are a whole other um, problem to try to manage there. But you talked about the blend that you guys have generated this time. So when you set out, we're going to do batch two. Do you have a flavor profile you're chasing, or do you reach out to distillers? Like, uh, is there an ideation phase, or is it let's see what we can get and then kind of move from there?
It For me, it is an ideation before I start asking. I do have a spreadsheet of people who have committed barrels from the good guys, and they're kind of all over the country. And then I just took a look and like, look, let's be real. A whiskey with whistle pig in it is going to sell, and that is the purpose of this, right? I need those sales. I'm going to work really, really hard, and their director of production is involved in the blending process, so I'm pretty sure it's going to be delicious. The end
Mhm.
result, but I do need to have whiskey in there until we really get steam and people are looking towards these every year and are, really understand the program and the initiative. And then we did malt whiskey last time, which I think, it was a little early in the game to do for people to really understand it. Um, Next one is going to be, which this is really cool, and this is the first one I'm going to talk about it actually. Um, we will have some Colorado rye blended with the aged malt blend that we did. So we put some back in a barrel, and it aged for, gosh, I think it's almost 3 years. It was 3 years, almost four. Already aged whiskey, of course, is the blend.
Mm.
And so we're going to be doing that blend for batch number three. So I want each batch to be different from each other and to really showcase the diversity of our whiskey. And we'll do other spirits too. It won't be just whiskey. That's
Mhm.
just what was given to us first. But I just wanted to showcase different regions, different grains, different profiles. So that's what I'm looking for, is for each batch to be really different. And then, to kind of look at it and go, oh, this is really cool because this is a Northeastern blend,
Mhm.
Vermont and upstate New York. And then my next blend is very mountain states, Colorado and Montana. So that's really cool. I'm kind of a theme person. So that's how my brain works.
Yeah, no, I mean, everybody, well, not everybody, most people love a good theme. There are some people that just, want the same repetitive thing.
The fun
That's
people do.
I agree wholeheartedly. Um, so kind of stepping backwards just a little bit, you were talking about the step up process and the internship slash training that occurs there. You asked the distillers that are a part of Good Guys, what are the things that you would want to learn as you're developing curriculum, but that's just sort of the foundational principles that they would wish they had learned. How do you develop a curriculum in a way that people learn, right? Because that's a whole other thing, right? Now you're a distiller, you're a nonprofit. Now you're getting the opportunity to help with education. But you have to do it in a way that human beings can consume that. What does that look like?
Well, I can answer a little bit of it, but not all of it because I didn't develop the
Mhm.
curriculum. Um, the board did that. What I can tell you is that because some people did go to school to learn to distill,
Mhm.
some people went, have food science education. Others had they were engineers before they got into spirits. So you have minds like that kind of already understand fundamentals
Mhm.
and then also kind of how to fast track these fundamentals because these people don't have 2 years or 4 years. This is less than a year. What I think that's the genius, and this is our craft. These are our craft distillers, my friends. The genius is going, how do I get these people actually ready to walk into an interview and go,
Mhm.
yes, you can hire me as a distiller today, and I will know what I'm doing. Of course, I still need education and time and all that, but it's such a comprehensive program. Not only are they in production, but then they're sent to the distributor. They literally help pack up the trucks at like 4 or 5 a.m. so they can understand what that job is like, is every job should be respected. They go out with marketing folks from the distributor to the on-premise to the off-premise. They'll help put bottles on shelves. Um, they they learn so many different facets of this industry because they don't all have to be distillers. We don't know what they're going to want to do. They might want to go into marketing or business, and that's great. So we just try to make sure that they have a very rounded education and they see small production and they've gotten to go to very, very large production. Diageo was one of the cornerstone donors to see very large production. Nicole Austin sits on the board, so she helped champion that and fight for that. Um, so it's pretty incredible how this was formed and that everyone gets hired. I mean, they're all placed in jobs after
Mhm.
they leave, and it's amazing.
Yeah, and it sounds an awful lot. My wife had the opportunity whenever she was in high school to do a few summers in Costa Rica for Spanish language acquisition via immersion. So being immersed in it can accelerate your learning
Yeah.
outcomes incredibly. So, going back to good deeds specifically, right? So you donate a majority of your money, or you donate your money to a handful of things. How do you select which causes to support beyond the Step Up program?
So just to be very clear, so I do have some costs that I can't get donated yet. I will work harder next year, like freight, like just shipping from the distillery to our fulfillment partner. There's a few things here and there. We've got a website, little things. But everything else, I don't, no one else is getting paid, goes to Step Up. The next batch will also go to Step Up, and then what I'm hoping is to do a little bit more collaborative blends so that it's not such a big haul every time,
Mhm.
and then start to diversify where we donate to so that we can put some other initiatives in the rotation that are really important. And there are a lot, but I don't do this alone. I do this with Jake Holshoe, who's also a good guy and just a really super smart guy. And then I've got the whole good guys group that I can reach into and say, hey guys, what are your thoughts? They're all, going through one of the toughest times, right now in modern times as distillers, especially after the news yesterday. So they know too where can we help more, what and get ideas from them and then kind of make a decision. And so that's how we'll go in the future.
Yeah, and the good guys group specifically, I mean, you know, things are going to get more difficult for small distillers on a regular basis. We know that's just a given at this point, right? Sadly,
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that group look to expand to try to increase the number of people that can help shoulder the initiative of that, or is it a pretty seasoned? This is the group of people that exist.
I think it's just, especially right now, that's the group. We don't have any plans to do anything with it at the moment. I need these guys and these gals to just focus on keeping their businesses alive right now.
Mhm.
I think, I don't own a distillery, so I'm in a better position to help. If I need their help, or I can say like, hey, so does anybody have extra glass that they really need to get, off their hands because they can't afford it?
Mhm.
Someone needs glass in country, so it's not tariff. You'll see exchanges like that happen all the time, but they really need to just focus on keeping their businesses going right now. Um, it, it's just the resiliency that they have is just absolutely incredible. But it's also heartbreaking to just talk to. Yeah, it's hard right now. There are so many people in this country that are hurting, and scared, and rightly so, because we're not taking care of each other like we should be. We've been divided and split, and now we're celebrating um, hurting people, which is just completely fucked.
Right.
I never thought in my lifetime I would see us kind of go back to very scary similarities from World War II. I have Jewish people in my family. I know the stories well. I visited concentration camps. And I'll tell you, if you're a person that's excited about deporting people without due process, I really hope it doesn't happen to you,
Right.
because word collateral is being thrown around a lot right now. So I hope you or your family don't become collateral. If you're celebrating that, you're a really bad person, and that's just it.
Yeah,
Um,
go ahead. Sorry.
it's terrible. It's just terrible and scary.
I know even in very rural areas, the number of folks applying for and getting access to passports is growing exponentially. It's a real weird trend to see in the heartland of America of why all of a sudden do this subsection of people in this area think they need the ability to have a passport. You can make a lot of assumptions throughout that, but I do want to ask a couple more questions around good deeds specifically, so that way folks know where do I want to go if I want to purchase this, right? Because I want to support the good deeds effort. And I don't even want to talk about tasting notes at this point because tasting notes will eventually come. That's a thing that we can all share, but it doesn't matter. You should buy it regardless, right? This is
Yeah,
a
you have your own
good
taste.
way to spend your money. And if you're listening to this podcast, you have discretionary income to spend on whiskey bottles because you got a shelf that looks like this. This is not going to break the bank. So tell me what your distribution looks like. Where can I buy it? How much does it cost?
So, distribution could be a whole other episode. I don't have distribution. Distribution is near impossible. At the very least, it wouldn't make sense. Let's just say that I would have to give so much money away
Yep.
if I went into distribution. So we're available online and can ship to most states. So you can go to gooddeedspirits.com. Um, it's really important right now that we sell this out so I can get cracking on batch two. As you can imagine, all nonprofits are hurting right now and are not getting desperately needed funds. And I want to see Step Up continue to grow and build, and for graduates to continue to step into our industry every year. So I really want to get cracking on batch three, and I can only do that once I sell out batch two. So I need everyone's help. This is a great present for Mother's Day or Father's Day, birthdays. It's my birthday next week. Buy it for me and send it to someone you love that's a whiskey fan. It's going to be a collector's item if that floats your boat, although I'm with Freddie Johnson and I think you should drink your whiskey.
Mhm.
Um, but yes, please buy a bottle. You've got some killer Whistle Pig Rye in there and some kick ass 4-year bourbon from Black Button. Really, really well crafted, two precisely deliciously crafted whiskeys that came together in a beautiful blend. And we worked really hard on that blend too. And it just came out delicious. So yeah, please buy a bottle.
Yeah, without a doubt, and I'll hop on and make my purchase later on. I've had the opportunity to taste through it a couple of times without getting too deep into it. phenomenal. I think, you were right earlier when you said, the first blend that came out was malt, and I'm a big, American single malt whiskey in the United States fan.
Me
Um,
too.
but the time that it came out, people
I
probably
know.
weren't there yet, at least not
I know.
largely. It's a phenomenal blend as well, but I think if you look at kind of the flavor profile that fits most North American or United States whiskey drinkers, they're gonna like this
Yeah.
regardless, right? You're leaning into a rye type concept, so it
Yep.
makes all your whiskey drinker or your bourbon drinkers happy. It makes your rye drinkers happy enough. We can all meet in the middle. Hell, it'll make a great 4th of July bottle, right? Because we're celebrating being independent in the melting pot of the world. So
Yes.
let's do that with a melting pot of whiskeys.
Yes.
I we're pushing up on time at this point. Is there anything else that you want to talk about that we haven't covered yet?
What I would like to say right now is if you are being intentional about purchasing, which a lot of people are, please do that with your spirits. If
Mhm.
you like, for the big guys to exist, believe it or not, they need the little guys. They need craft distillers. We need craft distillers
Mhm.
desperately. So think about your purchases and go visit your local distilleries. If you don't like what they have to offer yet, give them a little more time, right? Everybody, it takes time to figure it out, or just go buy a t-shirt, buy a glass. But it's really no joke, like, critical time right now to support
Mhm.
independent businesses, and those independent businesses are also spirit brands, so remember that. Look for diversity, black owned brands, women owned brands, and just be intentional about um, what you purchase, and most importantly, buy it because you like it.
Mhm.
Drink what you like to drink.
Without a doubt, and maybe to tag on to that, you don't know everything that you like to drink yet, and so that's why visiting some of these craft distillers is really important because you get the opportunity to taste into things without necessarily purchasing a full bottle to begin with. And so
Yep.
you can be like, oh, hey, here's a new flavor profile that I really, really enjoy. And if you are shopping with them and you don't want to buy the bottle, maybe ask them, what is the highest profit margin item in your gift store? And then go buy that thing, right? So that way you have your
Yes,
souvenir and they make the most money off of it.
I love it.
You're exactly right. We could talk about local craft distillers for much, much, much longer. But thank you for hopping on and having the discussion with me. I'm really excited to see what happens next with Good Deeds, because you are going to sell through this and then you're going to make the next batch and we're going to get to try that. And then we're going
Thank-
to see some other spirit down the line.
Yes.
I'm excited.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And thanks to all your listeners for listening to my very long winded answers. I hope there's some takeaways for everybody. Most importantly, I hope you try this whiskey. So thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode from the Embellish Pod. If you enjoyed this, please leave me a review on whatever platform that you're consuming this on, and leave a comment if at all possible. Hit me up on social media on TikTok or Instagram using EmbellishPod, and give me a follow so you can keep up with what's going on here. I can be found at www.embellishpod.com with all of my links, accounts, contact details, and more. Thanks for stopping by.